Big Tuesday edition of the Steak for Breakfast podcast, our oversized pre-Thanksgiving edition of the show. She's the vice chair for energy and environment at the America First Policy Institute. She's also the former ambassador to the Kingdom of Denmark. Always excited to be sitting down and having a great discussion with none other than Miss Carla Sands. Ambassador, welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's good to be with you. I'm so happy to talk to you in this Thanksgiving week.
It is a good week to be giving thanks and maybe not as much giving as normal because the economy's so bad, but we still all try to do the best we can. It's been tough with Joe Biden and all of his garbage policies, but we're going to talk about some better things today, namely President Trump and how strong he's looked on the campaign trail recently. Ambassador, I know you saw at least this week there's some new polls out suggesting that he's 50-plus points up in the GOP primary poll. You know, he's picked up a lot of major endorsements over the course of the last few weeks. Some of his great friends, former administration officials I know that you worked with, Governor Huckabee Sanders, you have Dr. Ben Carson, and then some senators, ones who normally don't endorse during the primary season, Roger Marshall of Kansas, Rick Scott of Florida, in addition to Texas Governor Greg Abbott over the weekend when President Trump, again, went down the southern border to humbly serve food to those who are working hard to protect us down there. When you see him out on the campaign trail, I mean, we've touched on it a little bit in some of the past times you've been on. How urgent is it for heading into this holiday season for the rest of the people in these campaigns to really go home and look at themselves in the mirror, think about abandoning their campaign and putting all of their rally and support behind President Trump to make sure he can take back the White House next year?
Yeah, I just met with him in the last few days, and he's in great spirits. He is the hardest working man I've ever met. I mean, the same day as he went to his sister's funeral, he was doing campaign events. This guy just doesn't take a break, and he's an animal who loves his country and is determined to stop the socialist takeover. It's so important that things change. I don't know if you saw his post that he put out within the last 24 hours, calling on the RNC to cancel all these debates and radically change their focus to, he says, stop the steal. And I'll even take it a different step. It's not just because he told me he's terrified they're going to steal the election. But if you look at what the RNC has been doing, and you know the old famous quote, the definition of an insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. We have the same leadership at the RNC doing the same thing, nibbling around the edges, a little this, a little that. And we lost in 18, 20, 22, 23. Pennsylvania and Virginia just had a terrible election. And so I think we need to radically change what we're doing to actually work in the 2023, 2024 timeframe, not the 1990s, and get every single person that's willing to support President Trump's agenda registered to vote, get them their ballot. I mean, I see Republicans saying, don't vote except if it's on paper in person. Listen, folks, girls and boys, you got to play the game the way the rules are made, and not every state's going to be able to change to paper ballots day up. I know Argentina just had a great election on paper, counted same day, but the steal it's in the DNA of many of these states.
Well, it's you touch on a lot of things that are, I want to rehash and are very accurate. The messaging that's going on right now. I mean, obviously, you just mentioned you had met with President Trump recently. We know Speaker Mike Johnson sat down and had dinner with him on his way home to Louisiana for Thanksgiving break last night. That was the first time since he became Speaker of the House that they have met face-to-face. Obviously, Speaker Johnson endorsed President Trump last week as well. That was another huge endorsement that I forgot to mention at the top. And then even Tom Homan today alluded to the fact that he had met with President Trump recently. And it seems like that is the messaging moving forward. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people who are in this race for their own reasons, whether it's for fame, whether it's for a future book deal, a spot as a Fox News commentator, etc. But when you look at the end game here and the finite amount of time we're just around 50 days until the first primary for the presidential election in 2024. And we still have these people talking like, they're running a fake primary under Donald Trump, completely ignoring him, bickering with each other. And it's not really serving anyone except for the people that they've been able to con, the very few amounts of people, that their campaigns are not only legitimate, but have a chance of, number one, winning the primary and beating Joe Biden next year. I think that continued rhetoric after the holiday season is nothing but reckless and dangerous, not just for the party, but hurts President Trump heading into the primary season. Not like he won't win the nomination, but the fact of the matter, the consolidation of donors and ground teams and support and endorsements are all going to be things that leads to him winning back the White House next year. the consulting class has been out of control for the better part of the last decade. They're the only people that make money, even more than Ron McDaniel for losing. And this is what is driving all of these candidates to stick in this race. What do you think should be the messaging to them through the holidays? You know, President Trump already hit Ron McDaniel over the course of the last 24 hours. You mentioned the post. We read it in the segment leading up to you coming on today. But towards some of those other candidates, I think it's going to go outside of just nicknames and more specifically talk about, listen, read the writing on the wall. It's time to get out and get behind me.
Oh my gosh, talk about unpacking. You just you just talked to, there's so many things to talk about in what you just said. It's like these other candidates are living in an alternative universe. It's like they're not dealing in the real world. But I also blame their investors. This is wasted resources. I know that President Trump isn't everybody's cup of tea. He's the only person that's going to beat Joe Biden. He's the only one that has the thick enough skin and the knowledge to take on what we saw as a completely weaponized deep state federal government. And that is in every department. It's been weaponized. And the people who work for him, we also know how to get this fixed. But it's going to take all hands on deck. And I want all of the investors to stop pretending and start getting behind President Trump. The primary is over. I know I've said that over the months, but I just came off of a wonderful event America First Policy Institute put on in Florida. We held a gala at Mar-a-Lago. President Trump was our keynote speaker, the leader of our party. And one thing that was said by Charlie Kirk at one of the panels was, look, we have to have new leadership at the top of the RNC. The base is very upset. She's a nice lady. I like her. But the base is so upset with what's going on at the RNC and how the grassroots folks are being shunned. Listen, the grassroots, those are our voters. You've got to give them their, their kudos and their knockus and bring them in and hug them in tight. That's part of us and who we are. I know the donors are different, but you have to have that big tent and you have to hold everybody together to get this done. And it's time to coalesce.
And I don't understand what it is with Ronald. We've had her on the show a couple times. She's actually sucked it up and come on Steak for Breakfast. And, we've talked about poll numbers. We've talked about the minor successes and even greater defeats. And it seems like her messaging is just kind of pre-prepared rhetoric of like, hey, what do you want to do? If you guys want to, make abortion the number one issue and not talk about the economy and the border, this, that, and the other thing. I don't really think that that's the take. I just think that they've assumed the fact that once those delegates are in for her time at the RNC is the chairwoman is going to come when she decides, not them, because they're all voting for her anyways. And we need to talk about the institutional change that needs to happen at the ground level. Those delegates who make up the components of the RSC that put somebody, in power every couple of years when they have the vote.
That it's so true from the ground up. So first of all, I literally heard her say right after this last election about 2 weeks ago, where we lost soundly, that it was candidate quality. And I call BS on that because I saw what happened with John Fetterman, Joe Biden. Candidate quality, forget about it. It's all about the ground game and operation. And we are failing at both. The operationally, the RNC and the Republican Party in general, we're not operating like a lethal force as far as winning elections. And we have to get organized. We have to do it fast. We have to use technology. And we need killers. I'd love to see someone like Lee Zeldin, who's going to throw the tables over, turn stuff over, get those contracts renegotiated with consultants, throw them out, and get this thing lean and mean fighting machine. And then when you talk about at the ground, so many America First precinct committeemen have been thrown out of different precincts across our country, including in my home state. And you can see that if someone has an America First agenda, that's where our base is. That's where we need to be in most of these counties.
Yeah, in years past, where because there wasn't as much illegal immigrants, the economy wasn't as bad, crime wasn't as bad, fentanyl wasn't as bad, you could take these national politics to small town America and be like, okay, I understand like what America First means, but it really doesn't affect me. Now you can't walk out your door in any neighborhood in the United States and not have to look over your shoulder because literally your life could be in danger in any city, any town, urban, rural, you name it. There is danger to the American public out there. And I really think that this election, for a lot of reasons, is going to be different moving forward than any other one we've had in the modern era. But I definitely think, like you said, the messaging and the people that need to get on board to help move this machine is definitely something we need to adjust before we go to the ballot box next year. We'll see if it happens.
It's something else. Besides that messaging, 61% of the people listening to us right now are living paycheck to paycheck. They're using credit cards to stretch them. They are struggling because everything is more expensive than it was. And I don't know anybody whose salary has gone up enough to cover that increase in gas and groceries.
No, we talk about it on the show. We have some of the best economists out there. 70% of everyone's total earnings right now are going to food, fuel, and shelter. When you just look at it over the course of like maybe a couple months, a bump in the economy, that's one thing. Now over the course of nearly 3 years, it's almost impossible not to live paycheck to paycheck and be operating in the red, as you so much alluded to there. Ambassador, last thing I wanted to touch with you on, I think it's just as important heading into our election season. We just had another big one for a populist win across the world in Argentina. The president there, who was kind of treated the same way as Donald Trump, political outsider, didn't belong. The international media absolutely tried to crush this guy. All of the polls going in to election day showed that he would lose by at least 20 points, and he had one of the biggest victories in Argentine presidential history. You want to touch on that a little bit with our listenership, and then talk about how that kind of correlates into the next election cycle here in the United States with President Trump, who's risen back to the top again as the populist outsider.
That is so much to unpack again. I mean, it's amazing how you're covering important topics. But the new president of Argentina, Javier Milei, is a really quirky guy. But I've seen his speeches. I love his speeches because he's a truth teller. And I talked to a friend of mine who's from Argentina, and she just said he's going to have to move so fast because he has so much opposition in the parliament, and then or in his his elected people that he's gonna have to try to work with. And then she said the unions and these pressure groups are going to get in the street and try to also jam him up. So she said he has to work really, really fast. It's going to be really, really hard, but he can help save Argentina, which I think that their peso went in just like a year, went from 6 pesos to $1 to 400. Their inflation is horrifying. She told me about her mother taking like a whole sack of cash just to get some dollars because the currency is eroding so quickly. The people of Argentina, that was one of the richest countries in the world. Yep. And then we had Eva Perón and her husband come in and begin that socialist slide of a powerful country. And it's a precursor to what's going to happen here if Trump and the right doesn't stop this socialist takeover of our country. Preview of coming attractions.
No, it certainly is, and something that we're going to be tracking. The beginning of his presidency, I think, down in Argentina for Milei is going to be one of the most interesting ones we've ever seen. I mean, there were so many viral videos of just him doing his podcast. There was the one where he was ripping all the different federal agencies off of the whiteboard and saying, they're throwing out the Department of Women, they're throwing out the Department of Culture. We're getting back to the basics here. This is what's happening around the world right now more often than not. The pushback from the people, I mean, you see it all throughout Europe as well. The pushback for a return of nationalism with the populist movement on top of that is just something that
Spain. Spain. And he promised to close that women's department within 21 days. I love him.
Yeah, they got their notice to clean out their desks. So it's pretty awesome what's going on around the world. I do think we're going to harness that lightning in a bottle over the course of the next 13 months here, and President Trump will be returning to the White House in 2025. Good thing about it, and even though we unpacked a lot today, we're going to have a whole nother year to talk with you about it. Ambassador, we're going to be live linking your website, the America First Policy Institute, in the show description today. But for anyone that wants to follow you on social media, God knows they should be. Where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter or X at Carla H. Sands. I'm on Instagram and Facebook a little bit. And God bless all of your listeners. We're going to have to work very hard to get this done, but we can save our country and save the world.
Listen,